So now we have a presentation by Vladimir from Trend Micro, who worked with Fyodor Yaroshkin on this project. Yeah, and so Fyodor is not here, but Vladimir is going to present. So Vladimir, you have the floor.
Okay. Hello. Actually, it's like a long story when I worked at the incident response teams in huge companies, and we have to categorize attacks fastly. And the thing that we do, we track it almost all the groups inside the country just to use it for the fast incident categorization. And the topic you will see, it's like related to the group that was visible only on Russian territory. And like 3 years later, we discovered the group. We found some similarities with Anger exploit kit technologies. And this group was arrested by local authorities in May this year. And after that, both LURK and Anger disappeared from the world. So what's the similarity? And we will mainly focus how the group attack the victims during different period of years. And at the end, we will show the video like of arrest. And arrest was, so at the same day, 50 persons was arrested in 16 different cities in the country. So we're doing research together with Fyodor, and actually now I'm a part of Trend Micro FDR team, but I'm joined from the 1st November. So before I work for another company and work for the huge companies. So the data sources are mostly network related, so we mostly relied on the proxy logs, but proxy logs from huge organizations, because during these times exploit kit activities in country was really huge, and we saw like hundreds of landing to exploit kit per day. And we just selected the activities, from all the activity we saw, we selected activities related to this group. And we mostly cover like a period from 2011 till 2015, with some reference in 2016. And we have a limited access to the host, so we're not focused on the malware. Regarding the last year, there were a number of posts from famous researcher Caffeine, like Don't Take Coffee blog. There were a number of posts of Cisco Towers team, and you can refer to this if you look to the topic. But let's start from the early beginning. The first detection we saw, it was in October 2011. And it was like a low priority event at the IDS, and we relied on the raw events, and analyst was able to trigger this event as an attack attempt. And this is the pattern, like in URL, like 4-letter pattern that was tracked during the years. And actually, that's the way we tracked this group. So let's start with definition. So we're at the BotConf, and does anyone familiar what is drive-by download attack? Please raise your hand. Okay, that's good. So roughly say that to be infected through the drive-by download, you don't need to do anything except visit it, compromise it website. So you will be redirected to the malicious page. And the attacker will fingerprint your environment, fetch appropriate exploit, and after exploit it will deliver the payload like a malware, and your host became a bot. So we use a term like intermediate victims, so it's the victims like sites with distributed malware. So usually the target was financial institutions like banks or banking clients. But to distribute malware, the LURK group used a lot of high-profile news outlets and resources related to the finance. So water and hole attacks, it's like widely, the term that widely used in when discussing targeted attacks. So like people coming to drinks, or not people, no, in this case people, but on the picture like animals coming to drink some water and the crocodile watching and looking the victim to eat it. So another interesting term, it's like a bodiless or fireless payload. It's like a non-persistent method, what we discovered in February 2012 when the LURK group started first huge campaign. So the exploit was fetched and the payload was only in the memory, and the idea was collect some information from the victim before make some persistence on the host. So we will discuss details a bit later. So the exploitation chain for the first, I think, 2.5 years look it like this. So you can see 4 uppercase letters and some signs before, like 0 for the exploit and 1 for the payload. And you can see on the content, like the landing page was HTML, and when usually followed Flash or Java exploit, and application octet stream, it was payload. And you can see on the screen the similar thing, but with visible with some artifacts. So this is like exploit loading, and this is some artifacts because it's the time when group tested their technologies, and it was the first huge campaign. So what do we did? It's not a rocket science. Just we relied on the logs, and we wrote a number of regular expressions like this. So we fetched uppercase letters with digits. And we got just not too much false positive, but was easily filtered by whitelisting. Like YouTube gave some false positive, so we use a part of Alexa list to filter false positive, and that's the way we were able to track the group during the years. So here you can see how the pattern mutated over the year. So the table is organized as the landing page, exploit, payload, and when it changes, you can see like the pattern was changed during one up to 3 or 4 months. So you can even use explicit pattern to detect it. And here you can see the scheme of attack, like both the sides here are related to the finance. And you can see the landing page, the exploit, and the payload. And in the May, payload was like 106 kilobytes. And after a successful compromise, we see C2 communication. So the victim fingerprint was based on the data from the host. It was hardware environment, software environment, and some information about updates for the Windows. So here you can see what bots send it at the first stage, after the first stage of non-persistent infection. So here's the similar pattern from September. You can see that the pattern didn't change it, but at this time maybe it was some of debugging, and we saw extra stage, extra page with HTML. But typically the exploit and payload pattern doesn't change it. So and here you can see the attack 2 days later, like in September, and you can see what payload was grown up to 20 kilobytes. So here the intermediate victims divided by year, and all the victims are local, but some sites was nationwide. So if you look at the top 20 news outlets all over the country, I think at least 10 will be in this list. And some sites have like up to 1 million unique visitors per day. So you can estimate the scale of attack over the country. So this is the brief look to the LURK infrastructure by autonomous systems. So we have like a number of 100 IPs used for distribution. And actually we have quite big we prepared quite big white paper with about 20 pages. So I think it might be published a bit later. And you can see more detailed analysis. But take a look, let's take a look on some futures. So here's here you can see 3 domains that was registered in 2012. And we look at the first domain through whois, and we see what attacker used at period. So we were able to technically we're able to use domain without buying it. We saw it on the number of our exploit kits when like we saw attacks and queried whois records during a couple of hours later, and the records was empty. So when we discovered this technique, what attacker exploited at period. And another interesting thing that in our proxy logs we found that this domain was used 16 months later. So the reputation services that relied on the domain registration time, which was quite reliable for many exploit kits, because usually domains was registered right before the attack, doesn't work it in some cases with LURK group. So here you can see like the correlation by one of the email addresses that was used for registering the LURK domains, and I think that in the Cisco Talos post there might be the similar correlation, and we found that Angular domains, some Angular domains was registered using this similar email address as the LURK domains. So here is one of the correlations between the groups. So for the C2 patterns, so we use different hostings, but was never crossed with the hostings we use for the distribution. And for the C2 calls at the first state, we do have the similar pattern that can be used to detect. So the pattern was like source equal HP and search equal HL US. So we use the similar regular expressions just to track C2 calls over the networks. And here here you can see the second stage payload was fetched. So the bot posted details about the environment, and in this case C2 made decision that it might be persistent bot, and the second stage payload was triggered by the bot. So for C2 we usually use a unique email per the domain, and lifetime for C2 was measured in months, so it's usually untypical for huge campaign. So actors weren't aware about their detection. So for the exploitation tactics, on the number of news outlets, we saw programmatic advertisement platforms was affected, and for our victims we saw direct compromise, and we will discuss a number of cases where we helped intermediate victims. So here you can see like an iframe with redirection to the landing page of exploit kit related to this group. And another thing, you can see the post from, I think, summer this year on the secure list, and Kaspersky found that the group used compromised distributives that was distributed from the alleged site to infect the victims. So that was, I think, the vector for the later years. So let's take a brief look on the intermediate victims. So in the one of the cases, we found that actor used memcache cache poisoning. So we just flooded connection to the default TCP port for memcache, and sometimes iframe was redirected on the site, and that was one of the ways how the intermediate sites was used to infect the victims. So another case, there was a compromise through SSH vulnerabilities. So we installed mod proxy model, and the code was similar to the paste bin referred here. And after that, we saw a post from Securi about similar attacks on the websites. Yet another case when OpenX was compromised and actor used a web shell to inject iframe. So we periodically modified the banner table to inject iframe and distribute the malware. So one of the interesting things that we found that like from 2012 to 2014, to beginning of 2014, the LURK group distributed malware during the very short time spans, like 40 minutes per day. And it was really hard to the vendors to track this activity and reproduce the attack. So you saw the attack during an hour and you go into the site to collect sample, but it was nearly impossible. And in some cases, there were legit redirects to the legit sites. So here we built like a table, like a statistics on the serving hour, and you can see that almost all servings was during the lunch. And another interesting thing that happened at the end of the February in March, we have a number of public holidays at this time, and look like from the middle of September, from the middle of February, distributed only on Fridays and days before the public holidays. So when security teams was away or nearly away from the office. So this group mostly used Java and Flash exploits during the distribution. And another thing we saw, like in some cases, we saw the payload with size was smaller than exploit, and we use Flash for victim fingerprinting. Yeah, and here some statistics over the time, like from 2012 to 2014. This is the size of the first stage payload. And here you can see like small deviations on some cases, like here, like the difference measured in like 100 bytes. And you can see some peaks, and we think that small deviations related to the crypto packing, and some spikes related to the a functional that was extended or removed from the first stage payload. So another interesting thing that the LURK group was very precise. So almost every request at early times was ended up with successful landing and the exploitation attempt. And the thing we saw that the number of requests was growing in July 2014, and almost all requests went to be a bad request, like 404. And 1 month later, month later, we found that some similarities appeared at the Angler exploit kit. So if we talk about the binaries, so usually detection for the binaries look it like this. So here's the sample from February 2012. And here you can see the analysis of the sample on virus total over the time. And you can see like only 6 antiviruses detected the malware, the exploit in this case, after the 1 week. Actually, the detection like after the 1.5 year was not too high, like only 17 engines was detected this. So here some reference on the exploits that were used, were a part of the white paper. So if someone needs some research, we have a number of exploits in Fiddler sessions, so we can extract it if someone asks. And let's look what happened in 2014. So in 2013, we found that landing page switched to the indexm.html, and this indicator was alive during more than 2 years. But the further stages like exploitation and payload triggering doesn't change it very much, so we still use the same regular expression to track the activity. And we found that bodiless or fileless payload that was visible from February 2012 appeared in the Angular exploit kit 2.5 years later. And you can find a post from Caffeine from August 2014 about fileless capability on the Angular exploit kit. So we saw the similar things like almost 3 years before it came to Europe and to US. And actually, the real name of the exploit kit was 3X, but usually we name this group after the name of the malware. So actually, it's another post from 2015 about similarities between both exploit kits, and it's worth to take a look on it. And after arrests, the number of security researchers published some blog posts and white papers related to LURK and correlation between Angular and LURK. And here you can see Cisco Talos team post, and you can see that the same email was used to distribute LURK and Angular. And you can see that activity of Angular exploit kit disappeared right after the arrest. So actually, I think that law enforcement spent almost 5 years to track this group. And this group had pretty good OPSEC. So we use like phone jammers, we use cheap phones to make a call. So we were able to switch phones maybe even every day, because one phone costs like $20. And during the arrest, police found many phones, and we use like long distance Wi-Fi dongles. So probably we made the attack through the compromised computer that was nearby. So actually, I'm almost finished, and I would like to show the video of the arrest. And while we are watching, you can ask some questions. So in this case, 50 people was arrested in 16 regions. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Any questions?
I'm Gael, and currently unemployed. So my question is, you showed a correlation between, for example, the Friday and the activity of the group. And as you know, correlation is not causation. So how do you infer causation? Meaning the group only operates on Friday, or mostly operate on Friday, or maybe mostly operate on noon. And how do you conclude it's not basically because the activity is much higher on Friday or at noon?
It was quite easy for me, because we monitored networks with like 100,000 hosts, and we saw like maybe 0.5% of the national traffic. So we saw tens of landings over the days of activities, and if we didn't saw anything on our days, so we use like passive DNS data at these times just to see, just to check the indicators. We know what was used for landing. So we have pretty good visibility over the time. And you can see like OPSEC devices like phone jammers, and you can see what some people not very old and some people not very young. Any other questions?
Questions? Yeah.
Somebody knocking to your door.
So, got a question for you. Steve Paulson, Cisco. So how did Russian law enforcement actually track them down? What was the thing that...
So actually, we shared some of the data we saw with victims and with certs, but I think the majority of job was made by, from the industry was made by Kaspersky Investigative Department in this case. So we work at, so I heard that one of the customers, like it was a bank, like asked them to work closely on this group, and they spent a lot of time and a lot of efforts to get them, and finally we did it.
One of the suspects looked just like you.
But I'm here.
Hi, one question. Where these people were coming from? What was their story, their education, school?
So
Who are these people?
So the people live in the 16 different cities. So now the investigation is ongoing, so law enforcement doesn't provide so much details. So I think it was a technical people with good education, and it was really hard to find good job like 5 or 7 years ago over the country. So many people went onto the dark side. So it was like a consequence of the good education, of the good technical education in Russia, I think.
Okay, one last question.
So I'm lucky I'm not on the red t-shirt.
So,
But you are.
so I have a...
That's correlation.
So, Vladimir, Roma here. Quick question. So this group was arrested, and it seemed to have been a very effective and large operation. Why did this group caught attention from law enforcement compared to other groups coming from the same background or geographical location? I mean, Russia is well known for its malware in some areas, and some groups get arrested and some others don't. So why did something happen for this one? What did they do?
I think it was one of the last group that made like massive attacks, like distributed, made a huge botnets related to the financial institutions that was stayed in the country and worked in the country. Because there was a huge change after a number of arrests, like Karbeb group, like Punch arrests, when we saw the lowering activity of exploit kits over the country. And this group was still alive on the country, and probably they thought that they have pretty good OPSEC, but they failed.
Okay, thank you.